Wrestling has an awful lot of pay-per-views. We have another one tomorrow called Against All Odds, and they've been advertising it for weeks, and I haven't heard one announcement that Phil Collins is going to be there, so what the hell am I even spending my money on? But we did have the Impact Go Home show for that event, and don't worry, not only are we going to up the downs right now, we'll also up the downs on Sunday morning, and we'll up the downs on Saturdays. We've got SmackDown and AEW. Somebody about a year ago said, I think there's going to be too much wrestling on TV, and I said, I don't think you're right at all, my kind sir. Now I'm starting to regret what I did say, but nothing can stop the finger of power, and nothing can stop I, Simon Miller, the king of ups and downs, which doesn't actually come with any kind of perks, but let's up those downs. Tony Khan, Scott D'Amore and Don Callis opened up this week's episode of Impact, which I guess is kind of like Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff and Vince McMahon doing it back in the day. And while you may go, oh, that sounds tremendous, that did actually happen a couple of times, because you never say never in professional wrestling. And this was of course happening because the Elite had screwed up last week's main event, so now nobody knows if it's going to be Kenny Omega versus Moose, or if it's going to be Kenny Omega versus Moose versus Sami Callihan for the Impact World title and the AEW title and the AAA title. Who the hell even knows? Callis made it clear that Sami Callihan should absolutely not be in the match because he's a little bit nuts. And while Tony Khan didn't disagree, he didn't agree either because he said, I'm not going to comment on it, probably because he's terrified that Sami was going to come out there and just stab him right in the face. The big spin here, though, is that we are going to keep it as a singles match, so Moose versus Omega, but it's not going down in the Impact Zone. It's going to happen at Daly's place. And how the hell did that not leak beforehand? And have they already taped it? Are they going to do it this weekend? I did not see this coming, but it did make me very excited. The compromise too is that the winner of this will take on Sami Callihan at Slammiversary, so here's Impact Wrestling just booking for days. And now, I kind of want Kenny Omega to hold on to the championship, because I really would like to see Kenny Omega versus Sami, but who the hell knows what they're gonna do. This was a good opening segment though, it piqued my interest. Once more, I have no idea what the plan down the line is, but I do know is getting it up. Don Callis and the Good Brothers were then backstage, and instantly they went to scheming, because Donny Boy was all like, oh, Gallows and Anderson, you better go and take out Sami Callihan now, so he won't be a factor. And what a shitty plan this was, because Scott D'Amore just walked up and went, you know, you are just in a corridor. I heard you, you absolute buffoons. So to make sure they don't head over to Jacksonville and they don't try and kill Sami Callihan, he just made a match official. It is going to be the Good Brothers taking on Sami and a mystery partner of his choosing, and of course Against All Odds. Now this leaves us with the question, who the hell is the mystery partner? Well, drum roll if you please. That's right, it's me. It's not me, and if it was me, I would probably turn up at Impact and Sami Callihan would just shoot me, because I don't think he likes me very much. Actually, turns out it was going to be Tommy Dreamer, because there was no build here. Around about 5 minutes later, Tommy just walked back into Impact and said, I'll be Sami Callihan's partner. I don't really like AEW. I mean, that's why I stormed off to begin with, so why don't we just do that? I was like, yeah, fair enough. We also had another one of these Sam Beal, Brian Myers videos where Brian is still trying to train Sami to be a professional wrestler, and this week he was focusing on promos. And fair play to Sam Beal, he then cut the most ridiculous promo on Matt Cardona, and he finished it by going, your fiance, she really good looking. Brian Myers then went nuts at him, being like, what are you doing? You're meant to be running him down. And then Sam Beal rightfully pointed out, no, I'm meant to build my opponent up, so therefore if I beat him, I've beat someone a note. Brian thought that was absolutely ridiculous and looked sure. This was all like insider baseball, but I thought both guys played their roles really well, and if we keep this standard up week in, week out, I will start looking forward to it. We then had a knockouts match and found out that we were going to keep that pay-per-view fight to a singles contest as well, because I was convinced we were going to get to the end of this Impact and there was going to be so many triple threat matches, but they proved me wrong, and good for them. What the hell do I know to begin with? Because it was Havoc versus Rosemary, and if Havoc had won, we would have got Rosemary versus Havoc versus Deonna Pratto for the Knockout Women's title, but she didn't win. Rosemary won, so that's going to be 1-on-1, and it's get it up. This was fine too. I mean, Rosemary had to hit Havoc with around about 82,794 spears to keep her down, but you know all about this. You've watched wrestling long enough. If you're going to beat somebody that you also want to keep strong, you You just hit them with your move as many times as you can hit them with your move. Jonah Brazzo and her cronies ran down to the ring afterwards and attacked everyone, and Deonna even put the Venus de Milo on Rosemary as Kimber Lee and Susan stopped Havoc from interfering. And that was a pretty cool spot. And then Susan went nuts. She was like, oh, you all freaks, I hate you all. Also, Tasha Steelz, you get out here, because Kimber Lee wants a match with you right now. Now, I do want to say that Impact does do this a lot when it comes to the Knockouts tag team division. They put two teams in a feud, and then to get to that tag team match, you do singles match, singles match, singles match, singles match. I suppose it's not really their fault. Once again, wrestling has been doing this since dinosaurs roamed the earth, and this was okay as well. I think the main reason for this is that not only did they have a back and forth contest, but there was not really any shenanigans. And given how many people could have been involved, I expected some kind of shenanigans. Instead though, when Lee went for the swanton, Tasha got her knees up and then hit a Falcon Arrow and got a 1, 2, 3. And I started to party in my house, because again, 1, no nonsense, but 2, a Falcon Arrow won a match. We need to send this memo around to all other promotions that maneuvers like this should absolutely be winning damn matches. And as it turned out too, we were saving the madness for afterwards, which is absolutely fine, because Havoc and Rosemary were back. They beat up as many people as they could beat up. Then they kind of had this moment afterwards. And if I were to guess, which is what I'm going to do, it's kind of my job, I would assume that they will get together as a tag team and then maybe win the championships from Fire and Flavor. I mean, that would be a really weird partnership because they're all freaky-deaky, but hey, Impact don't care about that stuff, and I imagine it will be quite fun. Steve Macklin, formerly known as Steve Cutler, was then cutting a promo, and he was in a dark room as some kind of siren went off in the background, and he's really mad. So I presume he's gonna pop up on Impact soon. I also think he called himself Mr. Mayhem, so I shall now refer to him as Mr. Mayhem, which of course means I now want Mr. Mayhem versus Jake something, because that just sounds like something you'd read in a comic book. Had an interview with Josh Alexander after this too, who is feeling really good after his Iron Man match win last week, when Ace Austin walked up to him and said, look, I know there's a 5-way number 1 contenders match at Against All Odds, but you don't even need to watch it, Joshy, because I will be the winner. And you know what? He may actually be right. Because it was then Trey, Miguel and Petey Williams taking on ChrisBey and Rohit Raju, and the sheer randomness of this. Now, I understand it. It's because these are 4 guys in that big 5-way match. But I mean, Petey Williams was teaming up with someone else a couple of weeks ago, and Rohit Raju was with Bali Shira. It's just really difficult to keep up. However, they are 4 really good workers, and surprise, surprise, this really good. They just went bonkers, especially Miguel and Bay, who must have had a conversation backstage and they're like, do you want to be the talk of the town on Friday, or at least the wrestling town? Why don't we go in there and just transition and counter every single move that we do? I mean, it gave me motion sickness. Didn't. Raju and Bay were a pretty decent team as well, as they utilised quick tags to keep their opponent down. But what they weren't very good at is double team moves, I guess because they've never worked together before. So when they tried on Petey Williams and failed, you know what he did. He got his hand really hot and he made the tag, which meant we got a hot tag. Trey Miguel was then running wild as Petey Williams somehow restored his stamina bar almost instantly. But it didn't even matter because this was all about Trey. Because he locked Rohit Raju in this like figure 4 armbar combination. I mean, the amount of submissions that guy has, anybody was going to tap out. So Rohit Raju, he tapped out. Ace Austin and Madman Fulton then ran down to prove that they are the biggest dicks of all, but this didn't really work out as they had planned, because Josh Alexander was then out to kind of balance the books, but there's already a ton of guys in there, and it ended with Madman Fulton taking a top rope Canadian Destroyer. It looked absolutely brilliant. You need to see it. Although I am a bit surprised we didn't save this for the pay-per-view. I mean, that is going to get gift for days. Still, I now think that Austin is going to win that number 1 contender match because he was essentially killed here. So now he has to rise from the ashes and get a victory so that he can go, yeah. Straight out of this, into an interview with Willie Mack and Rich Swann. And of course, Rich Swann is going to be taking on W. Morrissey at the pay-per-view, but later on in an ODQ match, it's W. Morrissey versus Willie Mack. And because of that, he doesn't want Rich Swann's help, and he needs to go and get his own revenge. And I was like, Willie Mack, you're gonna regret it. Tennille Dashwood's All About Me talk show thingamajig was then back, and he's just come out of nowhere, kind of like Swingers Palace segments. But look, Tennille Dashwood has her character down so well. She kind of plays this awkward person, but it just works. It just does. She's very good at it. Rachel Ellering was the guest on this, but she turned up with Jordine Grace, and that made it even more uncomfortable because Tenille Dashwood was kind of like, you keep losing, Jordine Grace, and you could see Jordine Grace getting more and more annoyed. From nowhere, Tenille gave herself a gift, and that did make me laugh. And at one point, it seemed like it was going to be Tenille versus Rachel Ellering at the pay-per-view, but of course, Grace needs to get her spirits up, so she was like, no, I'm going to do it. So I do believe we're getting that against all odds. I do just need to see how this is going to play out though, because I kind of feel like Jordine should have already imploded and become a bad guy, but you have to assume it's just around the corner and maybe it is going to happen on Saturday night. And as weird as all of this was, again, Tenille Dashwood, she holds it all together. She got this character down. Now, this was followed by a Violent by Design promo, and you already know what to expect from it. Eric Young will say a bunch of crazy stuff, and by the end of it you think, man, I'm pretty sure this is a cult, but sign me up and I'll join. They were talking about how they have to retain the tag team titles against all odds, but also that Eddie Edwards, the heart and soul of Impact Wrestling, must be destroyed right now. Because it was Eddie Edwards versus Joe Doring, and I will say this, it was fine and it was fun for however long it lasted, but I just knew that we were going to get a disqualification because the rest of Violent by Design were at ringside and you could see it in their eyes, it may as well said DQ. So yeah, just as Edwards was about to smash Joe with a giant dive, Cody Deaner just grabbed his foot in front of the referee and there it was, the disqualification, and I couldn't help but go, why didn't you just jump him as soon as the bell rang? This was also done so Kojima could run down there and stare off with Joe Doring, and I do think they are going to have one badass match because they will punch each other right in the face. But this wasn't exactly the best build I've ever seen. It kind of felt like it was just there, down. We then just had an awesome video with Moose focusing on his match with Kenny Omega. He talked about the fact that he dropped the ball when it came to trying to get that title off Rich Swann, and to date, he has never been the world champion. And what the hell is that about? I mean, it just made me excited for this match, especially because at the start of 2021, who the hell thought we would be getting Moose versus Kenny Omega? Certainly not I, and there is a big part of my tum-tum that actually wants Moose to win because he has just come into his own this year. I don't think it is going to happen, but I'm still going to keep everything crossed up. This was well placed too because it meant we could shine our biggest spotlight so far onto Morrissey, who was in the main event in an ODQ match against Willie Mack. And it being no disqualification as well benefited this massively because firstly, you knew there wasn't going to be any stupidness when it came to the ending, but also Morrissey, if you haven't realised, is really tall, and because Willie Mack is not so tall, he was going to be able to use weapons to cut him down the side. And he did this using a chair and a chain, but what he kept forgetting is that his legs aren't as big as Morrissey's. So sadly for Willie Mack, no matter what he did try and get away with, he always got booted in the face. He's a warrior though and got this crazy near fall after a moonsault, and then he actually went for the frog splash, and if he connected with that, I may be telling you a different story. Sadly, Morrissey got out of the way, and the end was nigh. Because Willie desperately tried to hit Morrissey with another chair shot and he failed, and instead, he got a foot right into his face, meaning the steel crushed into his skull. He was clearly knocked out within the storyline. Down he went and Morrissey pinned him for the uno, dos, tres. Or the 1, 2, 3. I don't know why I did it like that. Obviously, we then got a big brawl between Morrissey and Rich Swann to end the show, and Rich Swann was just waving this chair around like a crazy person. But I'm quite excited for this match because the height difference is just ridiculous. But not only are they both pretty good professional wrestlers, but right now Morrissey is also coming into his own, so he's pulling a moose. And this whole thing, well, it made me go, hey, I'm going to watch that pay-per-view tomorrow and I'm probably going to have a good time, and that's why it's getting it up. So it's the same thing that I always say, I know, boring, stuck record, but if the truth is the truth and the truth is the truth, Impact flies by. It's just so easy because they make it effortless. So overall, what was that? It's getting it up. Now, don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know what you thought about last night's episode of Impact Wrestling. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Then head over to WhatCulture.com, WhatCultureWrestling.com, or the WhatCultures, and make sure you keep up to date with wrestling. Come say hello to us on social media, and we have more videos right here on the channel. What are you doing today? Watching YouTube? Then give one of them a click. My name is Simon for WhatCulture. Thank you for joining me as always. I already ran down the ups and downs schedule. Please join me for the ball, or not. It's up to you, but I'd love to see you. I'll see you soon.